So there's no doubt, whatever you might call them, and what was it, Wes? What did you?
Constructivists.
Constructivists. So when a constructivist arrives, the first message I hear is getting ahead of this, because the worst thing is when they arrive, because they've done all their homework, taken all the good advisors. So real challenge on that front. But just in terms of getting ahead, because I presume this activity is picking up. There's the stuff we read about in the press. A lot's happening behind the press. It's increasing, so you need to be aware of it. So sort of the best defense is actually to get ahead of this, engage with their shareholders, is what I took. So what's it take to put in place? You know, what would you tell our audience in terms of here's the things you need to do to get organized to have a good shareholder engagement plan? What do you do?
Well, you know, as David pointed out, and he quoted Sir David Walker, which is really appropriate, which says, "Get other opinions," and because chances are you're doing something that's vulnerable, and if you get real, fresh outside opinions to test your thesis, to put it to the full test, then you're going to find that. You're going to really prevent that soft underbelly, as I talked about, because you're going to be able to fix that before somebody come and say, here's a problem that they have that they've neglected for years. And you have to be honest with people. There's going to be times when there's an underperforming division. It's been underperforming for many, many years, and you've done nothing about it. Why is it that you've done nothing about it? Is it because of the fact that it's tough to sell that division? Is it because of the fact that you find that the sector is going to turn around? But you have to communicate that information to investors. But if I'm going to leave a message to you today, is this: as a board, you must communicate. You must communicate, because if you fail to do that as a board, and again, management has their quarterly press conference calls and meetings that they do, but you don't get the right information that you need as a board when you're in a crisis situation. And so before a crisis comes, you should be out there trying to find out what are the vulnerability of the business, and also educate yourself on your weak underbelly so that you can actually discuss that when you meet with people.
I was interested, Wes, when you were talking about it, that in fact the big institutional investors and the pension funds are lining up behind, you call it an asset class. Andre, kind of your thoughts and reactions to what you're seeing in that front, and the reasons for it.
Yeah, no, we're not, but I can see completely why, because as Wes said, the game has changed completely. And as you know, reputation is a big thing for institutional holders like us, because it sort of is the key element that maintains our mandate. Our mandates are for the most part of my peers, are clear, they're simple, they are unencumbered, and we as a management team and our board want to maintain it that way. So reputation is key in maintaining that mandate. So you don't want to be, in the bud fight. But now that the way that constructivists are doing it in a much more professional way, and really focusing on the right strategic item or the vulnerabilities of those public companies, to me is a clear signal that institution like ours can be a participant in those changes.
Now, I'm thinking about my audience out there. I certainly have a number of large caps, and of course we hear about some of the campaigns against the likes of CP. But of course, when you think about the Canadian marketplace, we have a lot of small issuers, mid caps and whatnot. Does this group need to be worried? And I'm thinking about the number of resources they have to actually deal with some basics, let alone trying to think about, gee, who are my shareholders? How do I engage? How do I manage that? Do they need to be moving on this? Is this important for this group?
I think that irrespective of the size of your business, that you need to have a good engagement plan, because it doesn't mean that because you're small, you don't have activists coming after you. Activists comes in various shapes and sizes. Bill Ackman will not go after a $100 million market cap company, but there are activists who does go after a $100 million market cap company, because that's what they specialize in. But we find that most of those companies are the ones that are the most vulnerable because of the fact they don't have professional advisors. Again, as you said, Don, they can't afford them. They don't have internal resources like an IR team, and they're really stretched. And when you have that, that's really makes you vulnerable to someone coming in and telling a story that may not be entirely true about your business because the street lack knowledge or they don't really hear from you much. They tell a story that's not entirely true. They get the sympathy of your investors, and next thing you know, your board is replaced on something that you could have prevented had you have any form of half-decent communication to investors. I don't think you have to go on an airplane, fly business class every quarter to meet with investors to have a good strategy. You can pick up the phone and have a phone call and say, I'm here to talk about XYZ, but also if we just talk about who should you communicate with when you're out there talking, right? So your management team typically speak to the portfolio managers, the person buying and selling the stock, and in some cases they have a great relationship with these people. But there's another group that's a lot more influential when it comes down to the voting of the stock on a proxy contest, and it's the governance group. And the governance group are those people that you perceive to be in the back room, that they never get out, they never communicate to anyone, but they are very happy and willing to communicate and be a part of the process. But nobody ever invite them in to the process until there's a proxy fight. And then you talk to the portfolio manager and he says to you, oh, by the way, this person in my governance group, that's the person who's going to vote the proxy, and I have no influence over what they do. So now people are realizing that there's a completely different group of folks that we should be talking to. And that's the reason why we're not really fussed about the board going out there communicating with shareholders, because they're not communicating with the same class of shareholders that management is communicating with. The independent directors are talking to the governance experts within these organizations that will be voting on their say and pay, that will be voting on their board, and that's the group of investors that directors for sure 100% should have access to.
So just thinking about in this world of cost control, they definitely shouldn't be on business class, traveling around on the quarters. But let me just change gears. You mentioned the importance of, I think, getting your story out beyond share price, Paul, and the quarterly results, but the strategy piece. And I want to pick that up and get a reaction from the board on it. Once again, you go to these surveys, that go to directors, and the results in, how many directors really understand and can articulate the company's strategy. And you go to directors, and it's well less than 50% that can do that. Understanding the business model, how does the company actually create wealth? I mean, even a lower percentage on that. And then if you think that having industry expertise is important on the board, understanding the cycles, the long-term nature, it's even fewer. So getting at that, like getting up the curve on strategy, how does that happen? Because to me, that's an important part, and then communicating it. But David, I know you had an interesting comment on that.
Well, we've done a lot of work at the Coalition trying to find out how boards actually spend their time. And I don't use the word spend anymore. I use the word invest. How do you invest your time as a director? We found that on average, 60 to 80% of the time is spent on compliance and oversight, which is maybe necessary policing to satisfy the regulatory agencies and ensure the accounts are accurate, and that's not trivial. But my proposition would be that boards have much greater opportunity to add value by looking at the longer term, the strategy of where we want to be when we grow up and who's going to get us there. It's the talent and it's the strategy. To me, Wes has been talking about defense. I think there's a huge opportunity for boards to listen to these activists and get the strategy for free. You don't have to hire Deloitte anymore. You can get it for free. You just go out and you open your ears and you say, what are you going to do? Because these are very sophisticated investors. Their name, I think, belies the fact that they probably invested. In the case of CP, how much did they invest prior to going
They probably had, and I'm not going to speak for Pershing Square, but $5 to $10 million worth of work before they even approached CP board in the first time. I think their total investment was something around $25 million. That doesn't include Hunter Harrison or the Hiding management team. Interestingly enough, the defense, which failed, it totally distracted the company for not responding the right way. CP spent something like $45 million in a defense circling the wagons of the indefensible.
Wow. So there you go. But I mean, I think if you had listened as a member of that particular board and say, now, clearly we're underperforming on some metrics, what ideas have you got? You've spent $10 million. You've talked to 100 people. You've spent 9 months doing it. Let's learn. So for any mid-cap board, I think is a huge opportunity. If somebody's taken an interest in you, you say, thank you very much. Please come and talk to us. Join the management team at our next strategy session. It's a freebie.
It's a free advice.
Take advantage of it.
On the piece. Wes, you were going to...
No, in fact, you know, that's what I heard Bill Ackman said. You know, we consider ourselves as free investment bankers to our investment companies, right? We've done a plethora of work on your company. You got to also understand that when an activist come knocking on your door, they have spoken with everyone under the sun that knows about your business. They spoke to ex-management. They spoke to your competitors. They spoke to your customers. They, you know, why do you think Bill spoke to Hunter? It's because of the fact that Hunter was a competitor. And you know, he saw all the mistakes and the fixes that he could do to CP. So you have to be prepared that the amount of work that they do, it's hundreds of hours of work before they actually send you that letter or before they start buying your stock. And you have to be prepared that you can't just dismiss them that, you know, they know nothing about my company. They know more about your company than most people in your company knows about your company.
That's very true.
So it's interesting. So free investment bankers, and that probably hits Goldman Sachs and others, but that advice, listen to it, so that will help the process. But I want to back to that point of directors spending enough time, and maybe there just isn't enough hours in the day. It's unrealistic expectation. But Andre, your thoughts on boards really moving and beyond the compliance, but spending some time up there. And until you really understand it, it's tough to articulate, tell the story unless you really understand it.
Yeah, no, and I think that it's a tough job, quite frankly. People are the limited time. The people that are on the board actually usually have 2 or 3 boards that end up being in the same time period, and they receive thousands and thousands of pages from each company. So I don't know if there's a quick fix. We certainly, as a management team, are very aware of that challenge, and therefore try to get the board to focus on the right strategic issue and spend more and more time at each of our board meetings on strategic issue as opposed to compliance. But the system is such that they do have to spend a lot of time on those compliance matter, and if they don't do their job.